And good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk for this Friday, April 29th. Great to have you with us. Thanks for making us part of your day once again as we wrap up the month of April, wrap up the trading week. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Find us online. MarketTalkAg.com is our home on the web. MarketTalkAg.com. Find all of our streaming sources there, our radio affiliates, our latest news of agriculture, and much more, all at MarketTalkAg.com. Well, it's been a very busy week. A lot of news headlines have played into the market trade, and now we wrap up the month and we head into the month of May, closely watching weather forecasts and much more. We got to take a look at the market trade here today as we wrap things up. Let's bring in our good friend DuWayne Bosse of Bolt Marketing joining us today. DuWayne, great to have you on, sir. How are you?
Hey, doing well. How about yourself, Jesse?
Hey, I can't complain, DuWayne. It is a Friday. I'm going to be turning on the NFL draft again tonight, I think, and enjoying myself and just enjoying a good weekend. Hopefully my Packers pick a wide receiver tonight, though. That's what I'm
I,
hoping for.
I got some Packer friends, and we text back and forth during the draft. And I always give them a hard time about not drafting a wide receiver, but got them at the Packers do a good job drafting them in the second and third round, turning out well. And after last night, as a Vikings fan, I'm not bragging at all. My 11-year-old son went away kind of storming last night when they traded the pick down and went to bed, so he wasn't happy either.
Well, besides the NFL draft going on, plenty of stuff in the market trade here this week.
Yeah.
It's been very, very busy. We wrap up with Friday's trade, quarter beans, we'll call them firm to higher. We saw more contract highs in corn on Friday. Just looking at this market trade and starting there with quarter beans, it's been an interesting week, a lot of storylines there, but obviously trying to end it on a decent note here today, DuWayne.
Yeah, and you're right. Ending on a pretty decent note for the week, considering there's maybe just a little bit of me that's a little disappointed we couldn't go higher with these markets this week with the planting delays. Now maybe I'm getting a little backyarditis here in Northeast South Dakota as we're wet and cold and really 2 to 3 weeks away from planting, so we're getting a little nervous up here. But from what I hear, most of the I states. The field conditions are very good, actually. They're ready to roll, but what's not good is the soil temps. They're pretty cold yet. So a lot of guys I'm hearing started or did a quarter or a field, but then held off. And a whole lot of guys haven't turned a wheel yet. And that should make this market pretty nervous and gave us some buying interest into the close on Friday here. And rightfully so, because, boy, next week's forecast is going to be key.
Well, you mentioned that forecast, and you look at the corn market and more contract highs. Do you think some growers are maybe a little nervous and maybe a little gun shy to make any moves, even with incredible price action in the corn market, just because they're worried that if we have a severe planting delay, this market could shoot higher, DuWayne?
Oh, absolutely. I know just as a trader myself, it really had me kind of handcuffed on a Friday like today because I thought, gosh, I don't want any new positions, long or short, going into a critical weekend like this. I mean, we are in the full-fledged weather market now, and that means the Sunday night trade is more important. And I like to watch the Sunday night trade, see a forecast and chase the market a little bit is kind of my trade mentality. Sure, I'm going to miss out on 5 to 10 cents, but then at least I know which way the forecast is going. It's an interesting forecast this Friday afternoon. It's cold and damp the next 5 days, but we all know that, and that's why the markets are at the highs. Now, come next week, there's this little window there that they're not sure if it's going to open up and allow for some planting or not. It'll be May next week, so hopefully it does open up for some planting. If it does, we could be down sharply on Sunday night too. So it's going to be an interesting trade.
Well, and one has to wonder too, if we have more severe planting delays with corn, is that going to shift even more acres to soybeans, DuWayne? I
Right.
mean, what do you think about that?
I don't know. And let me try to explain it. I mean, normally I would say yes, planting delays, we're going to have more bean acres. This year, a lot of farmers went out and booked that fertilizer, right? And rightfully so. They needed to. All right. If you decide not to use that fertilizer, you're going to have to pay something back to your co-op or your fertilizer company to either allow them to store it for you for next year, or you're going to have to take delivery. They're not going to want to sit on expensive fertilizer. So I almost wonder up here where I'm at, if the corn doesn't get planted on any of the ground we can go on, even if it's late, and then maybe soybeans get shorted a little bit. But I feel like that's outside thinking, or we'll see if that holds true or not. So I'm not on the whole corn acres will be down, but in general, we really need prevent plant to be just low, period, because we don't have any room for acres to be lower. So that's the concern for the market right now. Like you mentioned, there's trade talk here today on this Friday that we might be down 1 million acres in corn, and we don't have a lot of room to do that.
Well, one has to wonder too, if we start running up against the clock, do we maybe, switch out some seed and go to a shorter day hybrid? I think that's, may not yield the best, but still might get us a chance to get the crop of the ground with a sub 100-day hybrid in some spots to wait.
Exactly. That's what you could see happen. Let's just say North Dakota gets crazy wet over the next 2 to 3 weeks again. Well, maybe you got some short 92 to 85-day corn that gets shipped from North Dakota down south for more guys to plant down south. But boy, it'll be the market's job to make sure both corn, soybeans, and spring wheat keep the acres they've got. And it's going to be kind of fun to watch and hard to predict. It's a weather market. And man, if I can't figure out this marketing, then I always think I'll be a weatherman, because they only have to be right about half the time. So, and I feel bad for it. That's a tough job. You get more than 5 days out, it's nearly impossible to forecast.
It is. It is almost nearly impossible to forecast. You mentioned spring wheat. We'll talk about that in a second. One more thought in the soy complex, a little bit of spreading between meal and soybean oil today. One has to wonder, though, with all the news surrounding the edible oils markets this week, if maybe that's just some profit taking in bean oil today, maybe getting out of some positions here ahead of the end of the month, DuWayne.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. I know I think listeners probably don't like us here saying profit taking a lot, because it sounds like a lame excuse, but it is a thing, especially when you get to the end of the month, the end of the week. Guys have profits. You mentioned the bean oil, that's rallied sharply to new all-time highs. So of course, if you're long, what's a broker going to do? He's going to suggest, hey, why don't you take your money here and exit? And that's what I would do. And I think that's what we saw today. So we just saw some maybe spread unwinding between the meal and oil. Just, nothing crazy in the news that would suggest bean oil has to go down. So I'm with you. I think it's just profit taking today.
Now, in the wheat markets, also maybe appears to be some profit taking, not only winter wheats, but spring wheat as well, down today. I know there's rain in the forecast for the southwestern plains. They desperately need it. I've heard from some Kansas growers who have said we're right on that line. If we don't get some moisture soon, that's going to be it. This crop's going to burn up. So, I mean, are you surprised that we're seeing a little bit of profit taking just with that forecast here going into the weekend?
No, I don't think so. When you think of Kansas City wheat, I mean, you should be down when we're getting rains in the forecast. And the funny thing is, earlier in the week, we had the forecasted rains and the market would not go down. I think that southern plains have gotten to a point where the wheat market is saying, until we see the rain, we are not going down. And we did see some rain this morning. It sounds like we saw a little bit of a hail there too in Kansas, actually. But obviously, those will be small thunderstorms. Just my guess is, we get to next week, I'm guessing the rains disappoint. It sure looks like the western part of the southern plains are going to miss out completely on these rains. So I think you see a bounce back in the Kansas City wheat market. Now, on Minneapolis, it's a tug of war, because they don't want any rain in North Dakota, Montana, or Canada right now, except for maybe Western Canada. So you got rain in the forecast that pulls down Kansas City. And then Minneapolis actually wants to go higher, but it can't because of all the spreaders. So Minneapolis being pulled back here might actually be a buy opportunity come next week if we can't get the spring wheat planted. Now, North Dakota's got a long time. They can plant that spring wheat. The further north you go, the further back that crop insurance date goes. And we're going to have to keep this price elevated to make sure they do plant that crop, because that's a short crop too right now. That's the fun thing about being a farmer right now, is everything's a short crop.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned spring wheat as well, and looking at those planting delays, and one has to wonder, if we have more severe delays, will that switch us over to maybe some more specialty crops in the Dakotas, into Montana, into Canada? Will we see, lentils and chickpeas and canola and you name it? I mean, that's something to watch as well, just because we saw, back with the prospective plantings numbers, that a lot of those specialty crop acres were much higher going into this planting season, DuWayne.
Yeah, and I think those specialty crop acres that have been bought during this winter stay there. They've got contracts for those for the most part, and they're not going to give them up. No, that specialty crop is going to get planted, so that's not where they cut back if we get wet and have to PP some ground. They're going to PP corn, soybeans, and wheat. That specialty crop acres, that they bought those acres and they told us all winter they were going to. I honestly didn't believe them. I thought we'd have more spring wheat acres, but no, there's profit in those specialty crops, and they're enjoying growing them right now. And poor North Dakota, though, they go from severe drought to now they're just, I don't know when they're going to get the crop planted, but it does eventually slope off and move away to the north. So hopefully they get some good weather in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, blizzards in the western part of the
Yeah.
state, flooding in the eastern part of the state. It's a crazy time to be in North Dakota right now. DuWayne as well. I mentioned this earlier. The U.S. dollar fresh 19-year highs this week. Crude oil, trading back up above $100 a barrel as well. Stock market is down today. Any thoughts on some of those outside markets, equities, and energies today?
Yeah, a lot of volatility there too. They're not escaping any of that, that's for sure. I think on the crude oil side of things, I noticed diesel fuel was really skyrocketing, especially in that May delivery time frame. So I think that helps support the crude oil here. But yeah, the stock market, believe it or not, we're down about 15% on the year. So we've got that just causes a lot of what I call money flow issues. All right. So guys are on margin call and maybe they got to get out of live cattle positions to pay their margin calls in the stock market. That's just the way money flow works and they get out. So yeah, these outside markets are definitely still influencing our commodities, but I think mostly the livestock, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit. But crude oil, yeah, nice rally here. Obviously, the war in Ukraine. I can't believe we've actually gone maybe 10 minutes without talking that. I know, and that's old news, right? It's old news for the market, but it's still definitely a thing out there, and Russia's advancing. So it looks like Ukraine isn't going to have much for crops for export this fall. And that's going to keep that wheat market that we just talked about elevated moving forward.
Well, let's talk livestock here today. You mentioned that sharp losses in this hog market. We're testing some support levels. We're back down around $100 hogs in the front month. What's your thoughts? What's going on in this hog market here to wrap up the week?
What a horrible way to wrap up the week in this hog market here. Frustrated with myself maybe a little bit. We've had a couple times where it's gone above 120 in the summer contract months, and seeing our poor exports and China's increase of their hog production by 14% so far this year, above 120 is a spot we probably should have been hedging more hogs. And we did it once and didn't do it the second time. It rallied back up. But boy, we sold off hard, maybe too far now, Jesse. Really, I mean, I don't know if June has any business really being below 110 either, because we got to remember our production is down. We have barns that are empty. We had a lot of disease problems this winter, but the market obviously has always had this. The futures have been at this big premium to cash, and evidently we're just correcting that kind of in 1 week in one fell swoop here. So I look for it to find support pretty soon. But I think a lot of the livestock market this past week has been, negative from last week's cold storage report, and then the stock market being negative. I think it's a lot of that money flow I was beginning to talk about. I think they want nothing to do with being long the cattle or the hogs right now, because they feel like maybe the economy is going to struggle, less income to pay for the high quality meats in the cattle market. And we're just pulling those long positions out, and they want nothing to do with the market. So it's maybe going a little too far, too fast here, and should find support to a fundamental solid demand next week.
Well, one has to wonder too, a lot of producers may be hoping for some of that summer grilling demand, whether it's pork or beef or
Yeah.
chicken, you name it. We'll have to see if that is the case. You mentioned the cold storage report. Obviously, we had the kennel on feed report last Friday as well. Do you think this cattle markets maybe had just a bit of a hangover here all week long from that fairly bearish report, DuWayne?
Yeah, I think it all ties back to there. Gosh, it's amazing how much these markets can change in a week. Because a week ago here, this market looked strong, and I felt like I was wrong as a bear, because I thought, geez, the market just looks and acts strong. We had money coming into it. They were buying the market. And then the cattle on feed report came, which of course is after the markets close on a Friday, along with the cold storage report, both, higher beef stocks, higher pork stocks, and a lot more cattle placed and on feed than we anticipated. And that just, like you said, started a hangover process this week where money flow wanted to get out. And yeah, people wanted to hedge and panic selling going on. So yeah, the cattle market has probably done the same thing as the hogs, where I'm going to say it's gone too far, too fast. look for June to find some really good support around that 132 area. Remember, we've got the frustrating part is we've got cash as high as 146 in the north, 147, and you got the June board at 132. Now, April is off now and done, so June will be the front month come Monday. And I think when we see that huge discount to the cash market, that should support June moving forward. Maybe some funds even come back in, go, well, geez, at this price, I'll buy it. So look for some support there. But yeah, it's obviously was telling this last week, the funds don't really want to be long that cattle market, and really, really depressing.
Well, and I know on the cash side of things too, this week in cattle country, I mean, we've seen some steady sales, although
Yeah.
we've seen some contracted out a little ways. I know that's a little bit of a worry for some cattle producers.
Yeah, it sure is. When they start booking further out, that means they've got enough for the next month, and like we talked about, it's May next week, right? So we're going to flip the calendar, and that means they probably have contracted cattle coming in. I don't know how much, though. I don't. Packers will still definitely pay for the fat steers right now. They want the heavy ones so that they can get our grade percentage higher. We're not yielding the best right now. That's why you're seeing this big discrepancy. Like I said, I'm got the 146, 147, and the highest bids in the north for the heavies to a 142, something in for a average steer. And then you get down south, they're struggling to get a 140 because they're a little bit lighter steers. Now the market looks frustrating. It's like, well, why can't we rally as April goes into expiration? Due to the higher cash price. Well, we had 150 deliveries also. So you've got a lot of feedlots with heifers that can't get a cash bid. So they delivered on the April board. So the April board couldn't rally as it went into termination either. So kind of an odd time. It looks cheap. It looks cheap to producers, but it can't rally if we have a bunch of 150 deliveries on the contract either.
No, it cannot. DuWayne, great insight here today as we wrap up the month of April. Any final thoughts you have for us?
Be on your toes here on this market. I've been a bull for quite some time and holding off selling this new crop, but we just started selling some new crop corn this past week. And if you're going to wait and be patient like that, Sunday night, if you get a hot, dry forecast and it's down 20, you might have to jump in and sell a bunch. And that's hard to do when it's down 20, but we have to remember it's very good profit. So be on your toes and be ready to hedge this market if we get these planters rolling.
Well, DuWayne, I know if producers need some advice with their marketing, they could reach out to you and folks there at Bolt Marketing very easily. How can they do that?
Yeah, they can call us here directly anytime at 605-448-2365, and they can always check us out online at boltmarketingllc.com.
With that, DuWayne Bosse of Bolt Marketing, I appreciate the time here, sir. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
DuWayne Bosse with Bolt Marketing joining us today on Market Talk. That's going to do it for the show on this Friday, April 29th. Find us online, markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great weekend.